It's close now. I'm finally here. I'm sorry. Up
Okay.
in Moose Lake.
Okay, so shall we begin?
Pardon me?
Okay, so my name
I can't hear you right now.
Oh, you can't?
There
Can you
go.
hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, I can.
Excellent. Okay, so my name is Tiffany Flynn Forsland, and we are trying to stay brief and to the point for everybody's time concerns, and so we will be timing each item to stay on task. We are given specific questions and only need specific answers, though we have an open-ended section at the end. So with that, let's begin. We're going to try this. I'm sorry, Commissioner. Did you get a chance to read our email that was sent from IWOC?
I did.
Okay,
I did.
excellent. And we do have Lisa, who will be trying to keep the time to keep us. We're starting a little late, but that's okay. And so we're just going to roll along. So next up, we have Sarah.
Yeah, and I think that Commissioner Schnell, we're going to change the agenda a bit to accommodate Director Khan. So we are going to actually talk first about the victim designation as it relates to the visitation policy.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so back in 2016, the DOC became the first, I think, in the U.S. to implement the policy that blanketly prohibits anyone labeled as a victim on a criminal complaint from visiting with their loved one. This one is particularly near and dear to my heart because I personally am presumptively and without merit labeled as a victim and currently being denied visitation with my loved one as well. So, from my perspective and from perspective of others that we have talked to, I think our stance is that as competent individuals, we have, the right to make decisions in regards to our own best interest. However, this restriction, which I, believe was intended to be a protection, has now turned into a punishment. We did do a little bit of research around this prior to this call, which was outlined a bit in the slides that were sent in the email. But, I kind of just wanted to bring to your attention that currently there's roughly 5,000 offenders in the prison system here in Minnesota that have crimes related to person. So that doesn't even account for all the other offenders who are incarcerated but have victims listed on a criminal complaint that have nothing to do with the sentence of which they are serving. In addition, I was also able to locate an independent study that was done back in 2017, just after the policy was changed and this was implemented. And that independent study found that generally greater than 60% of victims are in some sort of intimate relationship with the offender. And we also noticed that based off of an open records request, after this policy was implemented, visits dropped by roughly 2,000 a month, just here in Minnesota. So, at this point, I think what we're asking is, are you willing to partner with us to change the visitation policy to either remove or modify the prohibitive victim language from the visitation?
So, this is what we will work with people. We will also be engaging with the Minnesota-based victim coalitions, and that's partnership, and we can review the policy from that standpoint.
Okay.
Did you hear me?
Yep. So what I'm hearing is that the DOC, in conjunction with the Victim Coalition, will reevaluate the policy.
Yeah, we'll engage, and we would encourage. We know that this issue exists. We've become more aware of it. We know this is an issue both in the correction system. It's also has been with some of the courts, and so we're trying to find that right balance. It is one of the challenges we face. But I think ultimately, I would encourage, and we meet on a regular basis with like Violence Free Minnesota, which used to be the Minnesota Coalition for Battered Women, and I think they recognize both sides of this issue. And so trying to find the right way to manage this, I think would be an interest. And we certainly would encourage, like Nicole, we work a lot with her at Violence Free, and and we meet with them regularly, and we would encourage, you all and us to connect and talk about how we would craft a policy that wouldn't have the kinds of impacts that you're talking about, and yet address some of the concerns that have historically been out there regarding exploitation and some of those factors.
That's great news. We would absolutely love to take partnership in this as we progress and have a voice or a perspective as we move forward. Matthew, did you have anything else that you'd like to say?
Come here.
Thanks, Sarah. So yeah, I think as far as Mr. Schnell, I'd like to know if there was anything Safia Khan would like to add, but also is there a meeting that we could schedule specifically for this issue with that coalition so that we could make that policy address something solid? So we could have another meeting, and the intention of that other meeting would be to solidify whatever policy or changes would be there.
We have to schedule it. Yep.
This is Sophia. I can just add a quick context in this. So this is something that didn't necessarily come from Violence Free Minnesota back in 2016. However, at that time, we had a grant partnership with them focused on enhancing safety and security for victims of incarcerated people. And through that process, they actually did a number of victim interviews and focus groups across the state with victims who have abusive partners who were either at that time incarcerated or had previously been incarcerated. And there was one of the questions was around this visitation policy change, as the department back then was considering it. It hadn't gone into effect. And in full disclosure, I was part of that project and led it for Violence Free Minnesota back then, and actually led the interviews. And we did about 40 interviews across the state with victims from all different demographics, including victims who had gone back and visited and were actively engaging in visitation at that time. We issued actually a grant report, and I kind of went back and looked at it and kind of pulled the findings that came out of that process. And overwhelmingly what we had heard at that time, and again, this is something that could change, also understanding there are a variety of victim perspectives on this issue. So not all victims participate with crime victim programs too. So completely understanding that there's a variety of opinions and perspectives on this. But overwhelmingly what we had heard from folks at that time was concerns around ongoing abuse that was happening, and that the visitation piece was actually being used as part of the tactic of abuse. So victims shared that they were being forced to visit. Victims shared that if they didn't visit, they faced a lot of harassment. They faced a lot of checking in from people within the community that were doing it on behalf of the person who was incarcerated. We had kind of pulled some very powerful quotes from those interviews related to this issue. And then also victims felt that they wanted there to be the opportunity. They wanted the visitation ban, but they also wanted the opportunity to be able to appeal that in situations where somebody has demonstrated change. So what they had asked for was, that there should be accountability and onus on the person on enrolling in programming, demonstrating positive behavior change. And if that was happening, that an appeals process should be allowed. And the department should consider all of those things, right? So that's kind of where this all started and came from. The department changed that policy, as you all mentioned, in 2016. And that's something that I know that, folks in the victim services movement have also struggled with, kind of how do you balance the autonomy piece and the intimidation and coercion piece. One thing that was very clear that came out of those interviews was, because DOC is a government agency, because we asked the question, is this something that you could report to the DOC that you weren't visiting for that reason, or you are visiting and there's ongoing abuse happening? A lot of victims that we talked to at that time felt that they didn't feel comfortable reporting to the DOC because it's all public data and would be accessible to that person. And I share that with the understanding that there are folks who still wanted, even at that time, to continue those relationships. They just didn't feel that they were safe in them. So it's this kind of classic kind of issue of balancing the autonomy piece with the safety piece with the coercion and intimidation piece. We went back to Violence Free Minnesota after you sent this email, and they were very interested in actually circling back to this and working with you all, working with us, and going back and finding that balance, that is not punitive, that is not about black and white, that can take some of these nuances into consideration, allow for visitation when it can be safely done, and making sure that people have the autonomy to make those decisions and making those recommendations to the commissioner. So I think to the commissioner's point, I would say Nikki Engel is the point of contact for Violence Free Minnesota. We still have another grant partnership with them where they could go back and do more interviews, work with you all in making sure other victims that you all know and are working with, or people that you all know who have been caught up in this policy mix, and are not victims, and share their perspectives with them too, and then kind of come together to generate some recommendations on what this policy is.
Excuse me 1 second. The time clock went up.
Sure.
You've been very thorough. If this is excellent, your feedback, and then the rest, I think we've handled this pretty well. All the points have been covered, and we can put this into this next scheduled meeting.
Yes, perfect. I'm just going to put in the chat the contact information for the person from Violence Free, and then we can.
And can everyone else please respectfully mute your phones if you're not up to talk, so we can hear everybody clearly. Just please mute your phones with our due respect. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to budget shortfall now. I think that all of us have seen, the news articles and the press releases regarding the budget shortfalls and the subsequent closure of Togo and Willow River. So first, Commissioner, we would like to commend you for taking such a brave and bold action. However, we are still a bit concerned that in step with the closure of these prisons, we are unaware of any associated releases, especially as it relates to COVID after 2 deaths. So would you mind spending about a minute or less summarizing the coming budget shortfall and implications, your plans for continued CIP programming in the men's facility, and any additional planned next steps?
Yeah, I think we have about a $14 million shortfall. About 9 of that remains. We anticipate the shortfall to be between 25 and 30 million in the next biennium. We are committed to running CIP and are working out the details of that. It will start out moving over to Moose Lake for the shorter term. And then long term, we'd love to do some expansion at a minimum site, probably at Red Wing, maybe. We'll see. The releases, we are continuing with our, the release programs that we have had. There still are a number of CMR releases that have been approved and not yet finalized, with case planners working with them. And that's the update.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, I think that's a great segue into our next topic, which is around the conditional medical releases. Angela, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Commissioner. This is Angela Hooks. I am going to be speaking in regards to the COVID early medical release. And I want to start by saying we need to socially distance our prisoners as soon as possible to prevent further deaths by utilizing all early release programs. So with that in mind, Are you aware of the COVID releasees not being able to work outside the home?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so will you allow them to work and earn income outside the home to support their essential needs and stability in the community to succeed in the CMR program?
I'm not able to do that because of the limitations of CMR.
Okay, and really quickly, do you have an idea what those limitations are centered around?
Yes, the fundamental limitation is that this is not an early release program. CMR is not an early release. I want to really drive that point home. It is not early release. It is a medical release program, and that's it. And there are multiple components, and those components are assessed, and then a decision gets made. And so, to conflate this as early release is a mistake.
Okay, so can you provide the COVID releasees with a disability or employment documentation so they can qualify for supplemental income programs?
No, I mean, I can't do that. I mean, they can ask a physician to give them a statement.
So they're being prevented with the health issue inside medical health services, but you guys can't do it. Is that what you're saying?
What I'm saying is that they can. There's nothing that would prohibit them from having a physician sign a disability statement to make them eligible, to my knowledge.
Okay, question. Are you aware that the COVID releasees cannot apply for other early release programs from the community? I mean, especially with you just saying CMR is not an early release, so that would still qualify them for, say, maybe the MNCOR employee or the work release?
No, it would not, because they're out on a medical release, and that medical release, presumably, is to avoid risk of exposure, and that there's heightened medical concerns, which ultimately result in the fact that they are on more of a house arrest status, and that's the situation.
Okay, so are you aware that the applicants who've reached their 90 days on applications haven't received any responses?
I think it sounded like I was, there's been a lot going on. I'm the one who does all final reviews, so I think I held some of that up. I think we are down at this point to the near to the end. There's maybe
You went out, sir. You broke up, Commissioner.
ongoing. Those letters are going out on a regular basis, so we should have everything finalized very soon.
Can the CMR applicants who were denied and now have new underlying conditions, can they reapply or have those conditions reviewed as a priority?
So we have done secondary medical reviews in some cases. We've had people submit 4 or 5 times. What I've said is that there is substantive new medical data that was not considered or reviewed, that could be submitted. Absent that, the decisions are going to stand. So if there's substantive new material that was not submitted with the initial application, or not something that the DOC would be aware of, then we would look at it. But other than that, we would not accept reapplication.
Okay. So CMR applicants are being denied approval for certain underlying health conditions that other prisoners with the same health conditions were approved for and released. such as asthma, high blood pressure, high cholesterol. Will you address that issue with the CMR process committee?
Yes, what I will tell you is that that the denials are based on a myriad of issues, and to be able to spell out many cases, this is not an assessment of whether somebody's a good or bad person. It is an assessment of the full range of kind of where somebody is at, their ability to be released, their amenability to supervision, their need for treatment, the accessibility of treatment, what their housing situation is going to be. I mean, it's a range of things. So
I understand.
Yep. So that's the answer.
Well, will this reapplication be so that they can be approved fairly, and the approval process is giving the release fair and across the board for all of the conditions that have been approved?
So, I mean, it's not just simply the condition. Remember that, right? And then medically, there's a physician who makes these decisions, and you know, I'm not in a position to override a physician. I can't do that. And so, you know, that physician, however, has done re-reviews when there has been
right now.
new material.
Yeah, can you call back?
Okay.
Okay.
All
right.
Phil, can you mute yourself?
Yeah, Phil, can you mute? Okay, so what about the CMR releases? Are there any plans or developments for the coronavirus release funding to help those individuals?
We can look at that. We are exploring what the options are relative to some of that. Now, one of the things that is that, you know, when people signed out, they noted that this was a house arrest situation. Again, I'll be the first to acknowledge it's not ideal, it's not optimal, and it puts a burden on family. I understand that, but there's concern. We've had some conversations with legislators and so forth so you release them when we were paying on the inside, and now you release them to the community, and you want to use this money for that. And so these are just some of the challenges that we face. So we are looking at ways to be able to submit a proposal in our next CARES Act funding request, but we're going to have to be able to address that issue because that's already come up from some legislators.
And with that in mind, no matter the location, inside or out, the funding is part of that funding, correct me, is for their essential needs, inside or out. Is that correct?
So inside, yes. So we have to address the outside issue because that's separate in many respects, and that's the issue and the concern that some legislators have raised. So we are exploring how we would present that.
Okay, and finally, are you aware that some COVID releasees are being sent back to prison because of the changes in their housing or stability in their placement, or they're not able to have an income for their essential needs?
I did not know specifically that. I do know that there have been a number of people who have reoffended and some people who have absconded, but I wasn't aware of like housing change issues.
So will you look into possibly creating and or offering some stable housing options, or as you just mentioned, some corona relief funding for the COVID releasees to be successful in the community and in the program, well, or in their medical situation?
I mean, we will look at that. We have provided a great deal of assistance to a number of people who've gone out on conditional medical release. And so we've done the release planners have done a ton of work with a lot of people who have some pretty complex needs, and have been able to be successful in releasing people to some very specific stable environments that ultimately will address what their needs are. So we have been doing that, and I wasn't aware that that was the sole issue for people being returned.
Okay, thank you for your time, Tiffany. With that note, we'll go into Lisa with diabetes.
Okay, good evening. Commissioner, we've been seeing improvement in diabetes treatment since the last time.
Trouble hearing you.
Someone, we have. Okay, I apologize for that. And 1 unit receiving back fruits and vegetables. Okay, so though most are not getting that same treatment, like the 2 cases that I'll give you in 1 second. Many people's numbers remain at danger. We've been told that there will be better monitoring moving forward. Check on that. Can you check on that for us? And are you guys able to hear me? No?
Cutting in and out, Lisa.
You're cutting in and out.
Okay.
Maybe try to just put it right next to your mouth and put it on regular phone and not speakerphone. Are you on your phone?
I'm on the computer.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe just try to do it again.
Hey, can you hear me now? Am I okay? So, Commissioner, I was just asking where you check in on regarding the insulin and making sure that they are getting the right amount of insulin needed. The 2 cases that I want to mention to you is inmate number 1. He was getting 3 shots right before the COVID. Okay, so the COVID lockdown blood levels were good. He was at A1C, it was 6.5, it was great. And with the lockdown, he lost lunch insulin, which raised his blood sugar into the 500s. And with it, excessive sweating and dry heat was very, very dangerous. After weeks of no luck with kites and the nurse, he was switched to 70-30 type insulin, which ran into high and lows, like low 40s and then high 500s, which again is dangerous. Finally, they switched him to long-acting in the evening, which is better, but his numbers are still in the 300s, as others are as well. He quit eating lunch a long time ago just to not raise his blood sugar levels with no insulin and no lunch is working. It's hard for him to work. The second case is inmates. He gets out in 2024. His blood sugar has been like 200 to 300 or higher. And they give him his shot and his metformin. They allow him to keep in his room, but the prison diet is what's killing him. So he has to order fish and things that are supposed to be good for him to eat, but he's still way above safe blood sugar levels. So, Commissioner, we also have a nurse on the line right now who is an expert. She's going to tell us a few things. Santi, thank you so much for joining us today. Santi will discuss the diabetes and what are normal numbers and what can happen outside of that range as well.
Hi, Commissioner. I'm Sante. I just wanted to speak on a few points regarding the hyperglycemia with the diabetes type 1 people. So with hyperglycemia, normally, if their numbers stay above 180, this number usually brings the symptoms. However, those that has chronic diabetes may not show symptoms. However, the elevated blood sugar levels will still cause issues with their kidneys, vision, cardiovascular. It'll cause fatigue, headache, increased thirst. So with the cases here, the blood sugar levels, were in the 300s for most of the times. And being as low as 40 is also a dangerously low level to be, because you start to become unresponsive. You're not as alert and oriented as you were before, and it causes confusion, and you can go into a diabetic coma in this state as well. So if the blood sugar levels aren't being maintained, at least below 180, because the normal blood sugar level is between 70 and 120. So if it's being maintained above 180 and in the 200 and 300s, it can lead to long-term complications, such as like what I mentioned before, the cardiovascular disease, nerve damage, kidney disease, damage to the blood vessels of the retina, which causes the blindness, feet problems caused by the damaged nerves or poor blood flow that can lead to serious skin infections, ulcers, bone and joint problems, and teeth and gum infections. So, they have to follow a diabetes meal plan in order to keep these blood sugar levels within the normal range. And they also have to monitor their blood sugars often. However, with meals, they have to take the insulin. It can't be switched to the 2 times a day because it's not meeting the necessary requirements that their body requires as far as keeping the blood glucose within normal limits. Now, I understand that some people have been going without lunch so that they can maintain their blood sugars within a normal limit, but that's also not safe because, if they, even with the lack of physical activity, it can cause a spike in the blood sugar. It's just not food. Your blood sugar can rise from stress, the lack of physical activity. And I know that they have not been able to be out as much because of the lockdown requirements and the social distancing. So, the 3 times a day insulin injections are required definitely for these inmates. And they also have to, have their blood sugars monitored 3 times a day as well. So that's just a few important pointers that I'm explaining to you. And, I would just like to wrap up at this time and let you ask any questions that you may have regarding this.
Thanks for that. I've asked some questions. I think, the way that it was adjusted. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So we've done some adjustments of insulin, and we obviously have to work with people on dietitian and between the dietitian and monitoring people their glucose levels. I know that it's been an issue for some people and not for others. It just depends on kind of their circumstances that we need to be able to modify and develop programs that are going to meet the needs of the individuals. And so the dietitians and between the dietitians and health services, we should continue to work to try and maintain consistency on that blood sugar. So I can't speak to the specific cases, but I don't know, but we can. I would encourage them to seek out that dietitian connection, and I will talk to our health services to have the health services administrator at that site make sure that they prioritize the coordination between the dietitian and the individual and to develop a plan.
Okay, so also, is there a physician overseeing the schedule?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Okay, Sam, did you go ahead and have your questions that you have for Commissioner Sam? And thank you so much, Santi.
No problem.
And then I'm not sure, we did have a question on the agenda. Are you asking that, Lisa?
I just announced, Sam, are you here to ask the question? If not, we can go ahead and move to the time restrictions.
Sammy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? Hello?
Okay, now we can.
Can now, yes.
Sorry, my headphones must have died. Yeah, we have a couple questions. We would like the lunchtime insulin to be reinstated for the diabetics. And then also have ketone strips available for them, so they can alert when they have, these extremely high levels. And then, would you be willing and able to have a meeting with us specifically on this topic? And so you and like the medical director, or the health admin.
So I'll talk to the health services people. I think what I said was we would commit to addressing the individual needs and addressing that. And I believe some of that testing stuff is already available, and I'll talk to them about that. I just don't know enough about the details of it, so people can do that monitoring. But yeah, I don't want to have a meeting. I want to make sure that if we need to address individual needs, we're going to address them.
Okay, could we ask that the diabetics who had 3 shots a day be reinstated?
I just said we will deal with that on an individual basis, and if that's what ultimately is determined, then that's what we would do.
So who exactly should they reach out to?
Coordination between the dietitian and health services, and then they can develop that plan.
Okay, so from my understanding, I haven't heard anybody that's back on the 3 shots a day.
So I would just say, again, if people do the dietitian and health services, and we address this on an individual basis. So if that's what needs to happen in order to maintain the glucose as the nurse talked about, then that's what we will do. But we want to do that on an individual basis.
So I'm just gonna intercept there a second. It sounds to me, the commissioner is saying that at this point, on an individual basis, you're going to approach or make sure each diabetic is getting the right care. Does that make sense? Is that what I'm hearing?
What I'm saying is that if somebody is having issues of instability of their glucose levels, then a coordination between health services and the dietitian, and then we address that need on an individual basis. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, so then the onus is on the inmate to talk to their dietitian and the health services person, so the inmates should make these requests.
That's correct.
Okay, excellent.
So
Okay, so now then we're gonna head into the next section, which will be Lisa with sorry, I gotta kind of keep going back and forth here. Lisa with the technical violations.
Are you guys?
It's soft.
Okay, what about now?
Now it's good.
I'll say like, okay, Commissioner. Again, we want to let you know we do celebrate the reduction in the returns, but can you tell us how many fewer people have been returned this time than last year?
I got it here. We're just looking through the emails. I just don't have it committed to memory. Hang on one second. There it is. So with the RV population today is we have 484. The vast majority of those have been were in there from before. RV returns since between March 1st and July 31st was 402. During the same period in 2019, the number of release returns was 1,005.
Okay, Commissioner. So, you had mentioned before that we need lasting and sustainable change, right? So what changes can we get behind? Because we all are ready right now to get behind those changes. So do you have any idea what changes that we can go ahead and assist in? And also, will you actively support the less than more bill to continue even after the COVID?
So we're committed to staying the course in terms of keeping the drive these numbers down. Right now, when you look at the vast majority of these returns are because of a new crimes that have been committed, and so that's what the majority of these returns are really stem from. So we are committed to continuing to drive down those numbers. We're using the protocols that really came out of the consultations that we've been doing with Decarcerate and IWOC over the last year, and we'll continue to work in that direction. You know, one of the things, as I've talked about before, we need to develop more resources, in particular resources in the around sex offender treatment resources, because that has been an issue.
Okay, so according to the website, only 28 violators have been released from COVID-19. Now, the reduction in return makes it clear that a vast majority need to be held in prison. Yes or no? Will you fix this problem?
Can you repeat? I couldn't hear you. You were kind of broken up.
Okay. So according to am I okay right now? Okay, good. Okay, according to your website, only 28 violators have been released from COVID-19. The reduction in returns makes it clear that a vast majority need not be held in prison. So yes or no, will you fix this problem?
If you're going to ask a yes or no, no. I can't answer a question like that with a yes or no.
Okay, so moving forward, we are not, okay, so we know we are not in normal circumstances right now. So we need to socially distance our prisoners as soon as possible. The CIP technical violators are non-violent to begin with, and they are being allowed to apply for work and medical release. However, they are not being allowed to qualify for the C-19 expanded. So are you aware of this?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so will you shift the C-19 rules to allow the CIP violators to qualify?
I can't, because it's grounded in Minnesota law.
What's that law?
That where there has been a determination of a violation, that the law requires that the person serve out the remainder of that sentence.
So it's not that they've already been in an early release program. That's not the denial. It's because they have violated.
Because of the statute, the legislature put criteria in that really increased the impact of violation for that early release program.
So what about the many CIP women at Shakopee who have been in the program 2 and 3 times, returning on violations and allowed to go back? Why wouldn't that work for the C-19 expansion?
So we do let people go through the program, a CIP second time, but we cannot run people into other release people early, because the statute does not allow us to do that when there has been a violation.
Thanks for that clarity.
Can I just quick go back to the, you said you couldn't answer yes or no about releasing technical violators. Can you say, if you're not saying yes or no, can you say something about, you know, which violators you could release, or what your plan is for reducing that population of those folks who wouldn't have been returned otherwise with the new policy?
No, I can't in a brief period of time.
So I understand about the statute and whatnot, and you're explaining, but due to these circumstances with the COVID, that would not supersede these statutes already written. Due to the COVID, that wouldn't supersede.
No, the law just is the law, and there's no ability for me to override that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. I because it's COVID, this is not. It's COVID, so I'm just. Why wouldn't it be able to override that? Because a lot of situations are being overturned because of the COVID. So this is the same situation. There's.
The legislature can do it. I can't because I don't have the authority. So the legislature would have to change that requirement.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Also, moving on to work release. So violators can also be released via work release. Yes or no? Will you encourage this practice, and to what type of practice would you encourage? And can we expect this by at least October 31st?
So you're asking if violators can access work release.
Violators, yes.
That's correct. Right now, under current by October 31st, no.
Okay. So according to the website, 110 have been released on work release. And how many may qualify with the extension to the 12 months that was just implemented? Is this application reaching out to all the people to qualify? Yes or no? Is this application being gotten to any prisoner who qualifies? Is the same application?
So I don't know where the 12 months is coming from. I saw that. We don't do 12 months. We do 90 days.
Okay, so okay, I would like to send that to you. Moving forward, does the DLC cover the cost of placement essentials needed for work release programs?
They go, if you go to the halfway house, you mean? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, if we some of that stuff is covered in the by the halfway house. But remember that they have to contribute $10 a day, or I believe it's $10. It could be more than that, but toward work release.
Okay.
So why wouldn't this also work for the CMRs?
The CMR is not an early release program; it's a medical release program.
Okay, so
plus, remember, they are also paying work releases that go through a halfway house. It's the typical process, or go through a release through a county jail, outstate, or something. They have to contribute towards their work release program.
Okay, so I understand just now you said you wasn't aware of the 12-month program. I'm not sure why. Maybe, I don't know. I would like to send that to you though. But just speaking on the 12-month program, we know that some people eligible for work release are being released later than necessary. So 8 months instead of the 12 months. So yes or no, can you check into that? And when you check into it, because it does exist, can you ensure that this is rectified in such cases by the end of the week at least? Because it does exist. I mean, there's.
So let me just say this: that we have the legal authority to release people at 50%, but we don't have the capacity or ability to do that.
Okay. All right. No one has any more questions on this case, or do they? If not, we can pass it on to workforce. Force worked, Heather.
Hello? Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Schnell, the last time we spoke, you had told me that no one would be disciplined for refusing work for underlying health reasons. And yet that is still happening, including in Shakopee and Faribault. And will this be stopped? Yes or no?
There are some instances where people have checked themselves out, and if they want to check themselves out, we're gonna honor that. But we also are not going to let the job sit, because we need to have we can't hold. We don't want people idle. If people would like to work, and there's oftentimes that's the case. So we're gonna, we're not going to hold that position if somebody doesn't want to work or feels like they're in a position where they can't. So they're going to be held in. So that's it.
Yep, I understand that part of it. But when they're forced into working a job that they didn't apply for, and they get forced to use their lands and all their suspensions, and you had stated that they wouldn't be in trouble for it or disciplined, they should stay at TU status and not UI, because now as of Monday, they're all going into UI status and being shipped over to RLU. Whether or not they want to work, if they have underlying health issues, they're risking their life to go out there and work for a job they never signed up for.
If somebody's being forced to work at something that they didn't want or whatever, we need to know about that, because we're gonna address that. I'm not aware of that, but we do have cases. I can go right to Michelle Smith and she'll run it down.
Okay, I had also spoke with Marcy or Mary Graves, excuse me if I said that wrong, and she said that she had checked into it. And I actually sent her a video clip that stated when you said that, and she said that she had contacted you and said that they will still be disciplined. So I was just wondering, will that change by Monday? Will you get
who is this? I don't know who this is.
Marcy Graves from
that was like that was that clerical person that somebody talked to?
Yes.
Yeah, no, she's wrong. She's wrong. We took care of that.
Okay, so come Monday, I mean, will you contact Faribault, or how are they going to not get disciplined and put into RLU if they didn't sign up for that job?
If there's somebody specific at Faribault that you're referring to, this is Michelle, please send me an email and I'll look into it. But as a cover, we don't do that. So just send me the name of the person you want me to look up.
It's concerning my husband is one of them, because after we spoke with Schnell the last time, he said that, there'd be no consequences, and he's at the high list of catching COVID. So I was just wondering, now that he's on full discipline status under UI, he'll be shipped to RLU, and he should stay on TU status for that.
Yep. And so please send me an email tonight with your husband's name, and we can talk about it offline.
Okay. Can you give me your email?
It's Michelle Smith, so it's michelle.smith@state.mn.us.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
To talk further about that, I've had reports from multiple inmates that said so they were a high risk person, and they said to their the COs or whomever, they said, well, listen, I'd rather just stay in my cell. Can you just bring me my meds, because there just were two COVID situations. This was in Shakopee. There was two COVID situations at the plant, or whatever they call the workplace, and there was two guards that just got it. I just want to stay in my cell for the next couple of days because I don't feel safe, because I have compromising health conditions. And the only barrier that was there in that situation was apparently she wasn't allowed to have her medicine brought to her or something like that. And so that's one specific situation that I heard. So if that gives you any empirical perspective, anybody. So.
Yeah, actually, I mean, I know that it's a specific to you, but I would have to know who that person is, because there are times that we do bring meds to people. So if you know the name of that person, that I can individually look up and call back to the facility. But otherwise, if I just said that, how you described it, I'm not sure we would get to the bottom of it.
Okay. Well, I'm painting the picture as saying like this is happening in multiple different ways in multiple facilities. So it's something to look at. I can send you the name specifically later.
Okay, but one of the things to remember is that people work with the people that they live with. So if you're in the unit and you're walking around the unit and you're hanging out with people in the unit, those are the exact same people that you go to the gym with and the exact same people that you go to work with. And so we live by assignment and they stay in cohorts. So they're not being exposed to additional people. They live, work, and recreate with the same people.
Okay, Michelle, can you hear me? This is Lisa again. I'm sorry, guys. Are you spelling your name, first name Michelle?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
SMITH.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
I just have one more question for Mr. Schnell, if he can hear me. Mr. Schnell, I was also going to ask, when is the no work, no play policy going to end?
What?
When will the no work, no play policy end?
I don't know that. We need to address them. If there are problems, we need to address them. And so that's what we're going to do. So it's not a policy. So
there's enough people that want to work. So, I mean, we encourage everyone to work for a lot of different reasons. And like I just explained, they're not live and work and go to the gym with the same people. And so I think that everyone should be encouraged to do something other than nothing all day.
Antonio, you have something.
Yeah, so with that whole stay together thing, the units and people who work together and stay together, what are we doing to ensure that staff aren't contaminating the units? Because I know from experience that different staff are going to different units at different times. Squad comes in the units. Many times they're, touching other offenders, other doors, different things around the unit. They may work in one unit for an hour or two and then go to a different unit. So what's being done to address that?
We try to address that really through comprehensive screening. We've also done significantly increased levels of testing across the system of both incarcerated people as well as staff. And we're trying to do as much minimization of that as we can. Obviously, we can't in every case, but ultimately, it's those standard protocols and monitoring.
The inmates that we represent did request that the guards be tested weekly, and I'm not thinking of like we demand every test for every single guard. But I would like to know if there's a guarantee that every guard is getting tested once a month, or for that matter, every person that's coming to the facility, or something to that effect.
Yeah, so we take our direction for testing from the Department of Health, and it's also based on the availability of resources for those tests. So we do testing at facilities when there are breakouts, and we also do targeted testing. So there is no guarantee that everyone is going to get tested every week. But we do testing, and we do multiple testings at each of the facilities for various reasons.
And so it's been comprehensive. We've done tens of thousands of tests since we started doing testing.
So it's safe to say that cross-contamination through staff is still an issue.
It's always going to be an issue at some level. There's always risk. Everything has risk. We try to mitigate it as much as possible, but there is no way around that.
And part of it too is you know, I think we need to be clear that it's mask compliance by everyone, both staff and those that are incarcerated. It's social distancing, it's proper hand washing, and it's doing all those things, and everybody owns a part in that. We also try really hard with regard to the schedule, but as you can imagine, depending on what's happening a certain day, especially the example of the squad, there are going to be circumstances where people have to go to other units that they don't normally work in. But we have extremely limited those day-to-day contacts to the best that we can.
We also would like to request the personal protective equipment. If there could be some type of review on respiratory equipment and gloves, just to make sure that I want to at least make sure that the guards have the stuff, considering they're the ones that are coming in and out. I mean, I would like to say, can we just have gloves and masks readily available for all the inmates? But could you give us some information on that as well? Like what I heard was the inmates were all given one mask and they have no mask on canteen. Is there a face mask on canteen?
Yeah, we have issued face masks at the facilities up to 5 times at some of the facilities. If they have a mask and it doesn't fit, it gets stretched out and they need a new one. But we have done mask distribution up to 5 times at every facility. Every single person has more than one mask in their room that's available to them. We also have PPE protocol for staff, given various circumstances of where they work, who they're working with, if they're doing transport, if they're working in the quarantine unit. We take all of that guidance from the Department of Health, and we are actually also mass producing PPE in the department. That's also used throughout the state. So yeah, we have a pretty comprehensive PPE procedure that gets updated regularly through the Department of Health.
The background behind that request is I have a loved one that was actually, she messaged me and said that she was crying because she was actually knitting a mask in her cell because there was 2 people that were exposed to her unit. And so that's just important to look at for everyone that's incarcerated, that they have access to some.
There are masks available for every single person, and if they don't have one, if they've lost it, if it's wet, they can't wear it, they can ask for another one. And we also have masks, a limited supply of masks if a visitor shows up and they don't have one, that we can also do. So we're taking every avenue that we can to ensure that everyone has a mask.
Remember that the masks themselves were made at Shakopee, Moose Lake, and a lot of these other facilities. So that's those 4 or 5 masks that we've distributed. Those were made by people in industry.
And then I didn't hear anything about gloves.
So depending on the studies that you look at, gloves are not a necessity, and in fact, they can actually transmit and carry germs from one place to another. If all you do is wear gloves everywhere you go, then every doorknob that you touch, every desk, every pen, every place you go from building to building, or your car, your room, the day room, the gym, you're just moving the germs around. The best thing that people can do is to wash their hands when they go to various places. But gloves are only limitedly help through the PPE process, depending on what the actual situation is.
Okay. Yeah. So gloves would have to be worn on and off, on and off, on and off on a regular basis. Okay. Thank you. And we are now going to go to Lisa. And
Tiffany, sorry, it just looks like Antonio had something to say. You want to just quick let him ask?
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Thank you, David. Commissioner and Michelle, that's a very valid point that we were bringing up. In Rush City, we noticed that staff don't swap their gloves out. They will do a lot of pat searches, cell searches, and wear the same gloves. This was brought up and nothing was done about it. You have guards who bring their own personal gloves in, cloth gloves, and like you say, they're just transmitting whatever, passing it to other inmates, to the doors, the cells that they search over and over again. So is there anything?
We'll talk with staff about that. There's no way you can change gloves in between everything. That's one of the challenges we have. But we'll talk about that and see if there are ways we can tighten protocols or educate on hand washing stuff or whatever. So we'll put our incident management team on discussing that with the facilities.
They also have germicidal spray that they spray on the gloves as well. And so I think a combination, but I'll look into it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I had to unmute. Okay, so now we're ready to head to the next section, DOC borders with Lisa and Bruce.
Hi, good evening, Commissioner Schnell. I am just wanting to say thank you for your movement on the DOC inmates from the county jails back into the DOC. I am wondering what your anticipated timeline is for the remaining men and if you know exactly how many are still out.
There's 95 out, and we will get them in as quickly as we can. Obviously, St. Cloud has been impacted, as you know, and so we're doing intel right now at Lino Lakes. So we have made significant progress in terms of St. Cloud's recovery rates, and so we want to get that stable, and then we will start bringing people back. And to manage, we want to be able to manage that quarantine process. So as soon as we can, we want to do that. We had started, and then we had the outbreak at St. Cloud, and that slowed it, but we're there.
Yeah, because I'm just concerned because it appears that only those that have been out for over 12 months and those going to boot camp have been moved recently, but you're saying that you're still planning to bring them all back as soon as possible.
They're all coming. They're all coming back. We're not gonna. This is all about kind of risk management, and so we want to make sure that we want to get them all back, but we want to do it in a way that doesn't put them at risk and so forth. So as soon as we can, we're going to get them back.
It also goes along with the exact same thing that we're talking. It also goes along with the same thing we're talking about. Oh.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. Going along with what you were saying, I couldn't hear what she was saying.
Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So if we were to bring this to legislation to end the contracts to warehouse DOC inmates in county jails, would we have your support?
I would not support. I would not support a full ban. In fact, we just did some legislative change that would allow us to do that short-term stuff. As many of you know, we have people who have these short sentences, and by the time they get credit for time served, they come into DOC for days or a week or two, and we're yanking them out of their home county or community and moving them back around at great expense. And so what we have now some short periods of time, as long as they're within X number of period of time before their release, we could keep them in their community so that they're there, and especially it was intended for those short-term people.
I agree.
We do not want to use other facilities. Right now, we're doing it, as I said before, because we had that construction project at St. Cloud. It's a 180-bed unit. That's going to be finalized by January, and then COVID hit, which also creates the challenge. But our goal is to not use, because obviously right now we have a budget issue of major, and if we can save that out of facility cost, that actually is critical to us from a budget standpoint.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm not talking about the short-term people that are housed out of facility. I'm talking about the ones that are sent there for 12 months and then basically sit there and do absolutely nothing. That would be our target, would be to not have them in
I think
county jails.
Yeah, we would share that. We would share that from a philosophical standpoint. The problem is going to be that when the state runs into a problem, if that ban is the big thing that exists is for us to ship people out of state to other systems, and that's even in some cases could be worse. So I think that's the problem here. We have to ultimately deal with and as a state develop good sound policy about how we're going to manage our population in a sustainable way, and really only incarcerate the people that need to be incarcerated, one, and two, to find ways to put people on the road to addressing whatever needs they have and get them back into the community. That's the goal, and if we can do that, we increase the likelihood that we will not need to use housing out of facility.
Well, and one of the reasons that we're in the position we are now is because of the construction project at St. Cloud. So for the past year, we've been down 180 beds. If you think about it, when that project is done, we would have all of those people back in the system.
Yeah, I would just like to add on one more question. I mean, I appreciate the people who have been being moved too, but back in June, you would hope that the time frame would be a month or two, and we're almost at 2 months. And I understand all the issues with moving people during COVID. Now I don't hear a time frame. I'm just worried we're going to be sitting here at the end of the year, still saying.
Okay. Well, I'm not saying that it's going to be the end of the year. I'm saying that as soon as we can safely move them, we will move them, and that's the answer.
Has a
I
move?
just have to say, yeah, but I just have to say the other thing is that we're talking about, we want to talk about social distancing in the prisons, and then we want to talk about moving everybody back into the prisons. So we're doing the best we can with the population that we have, and we are under 100 guys at the jails. We will continue to bring the guys back as soon as we have 2 facilities that have COVID right now, and so as soon as those facilities we will constantly make those adjustments to continue to bring those people back.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so are we done with that section? Are we waiting for something? Because I have Matt next, but you kind of covered some of this, Matt.
Are we talking about the, okay, so we talked about the COVID-19 and the guards, but the GTL tablets, and then the GTL tablets, and there was something else. Okay, well, we'll just talk about the GTL. So, the GTL tablets, Mr. Schnell, want to know, are they going to have phone capabilities? Because moving forward with the COVID-19 and whatever way the world is going to go, it would make more sense, since I believe they have the capability of having the phone attached to the tablet in some way. Now, what is the DOC's policy with that? Because as far as I understand, they don't have GTL tablets. They're still operating on the JPay system, and they were given formal letters last December that they were going to be switching in January. And so everybody freaked out last December, thinking they all were going to lose all their JPay information. And it's been a year later, and they still are on JPay. So can you give us any clarification on that topic?
Yeah, so that the wiring, all the cabling, and all of the facilities is being done, and so that's what's happening. We've announced in January that change was going to happen. We had hoped it would happen sooner, but obviously the same thing happened with the rest of life. COVID ultimately resulted in a significant slowdown of the cabling of the facilities for the GTL tablets. And so right now we anticipate, and they anticipate that will be completed by the end or right around the end of the year, and so that we can get them deployed. You point out that the tablets do have that ultimate capability. We want to get them deployed. We want to take advantage of working through whatever bugs and issues we have to do with that. Everybody's going to be provided one in the system, and then once we do that, we're going to continually evaluate that. But I can tell you today, phone access will not be turned on upon their distribution.
Okay, and then another question from that same constituent group. There was a group of inmates that wanted to know what happened to Nate Knutson. Did he get fired? Did he quit, or was there some type of thing going on? Because it seemed like he was a prominent leader in the administration, and then all of a sudden he just fell off the radar. Can you give us any clarification on that?
Yeah, he was removed from his position.
Okay. Okay, and then I think we're moving on to the visitation issue. Jennifer, do you want to pilot that?
Yes. Hello, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Schnell, sir, it's Jennifer. I did send you a message. I'm still waiting for contact in order to come on board with the committee, but nobody's made contact with me yet. And I reviewed everything I have from you, and I'm just wondering if I missed a step or if they no longer will have me.
So Jennifer, this is Michelle. I have your contact information. The commissioner gave it to me. We were going to put something together, and then we started visiting back in the facilities. So the visiting committee was working through that process. Jesse Pugh is the associate warden at Rush City. He's the person that's going to organize the meeting. I talked to him late last week, and we'll be sending your information to him. So we definitely still have your contact information with plans of trying to move forward, getting something set up.
Okay, and is there any kind of timeline that I could kind of focus on, or is there any prep work that would help make this process move along more quickly?
I told him I was going to send him your information and that he could contact you and set something up for mid-September or so. So that would be the time frame for setting up a meeting. As for preparing anything, I'll have the two of you go back and forth once he wants to contact you. I guess I can't think of anything off the top of my head.
Okay, that sounds good. Is there, and I'm sorry, you might have already told me this. I did catch that you said mid-September that he was going to set up a meeting, but will he be making contact with me prior to that so that I could maybe start working on ideas or start creating some sort of outline?
Yeah, I would hope that you would hear from him by next week. I was out of the office today, and so yeah, I'm hoping that you'll hear from him by next week so you guys can get something set up for mid-September.
Excellent. And then also, if I don't hear from him, because I know Mr. Schnell was kind enough to allow me to get a hold of him if I didn't hear from someone, should I do the same if I don't hear from Jesse at Rush City? Should I get a hold of him?
Get a hold of me. If you could just get a hold of me, that would be great. And then on that email address that I gave out earlier.
Okay, I have that written down. And then is there any other guidance that I could request from you, some sort of guidance as to what I should prepare for, or anything else I can bring to the table?
No, I think it's personal experience is what we want to hear and what ideas people have and what thoughts and you know, the more you can get and glean kind of insights from others to bring to that and speak to that, I think that would be great.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time. That's all I have for tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, then we are going into victim designation with Sarah.
We did that earlier, right?
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's the first thing we covered. Sorry.
yep. So then we're going to grievance procedure with Angela.
Hi, so we have multiple reports of the grievance procedure and chain of command not being adhered to, including prisoners being threatened with segregation for filing or appealing grievances. So can you communicate that to the wardens by next week, that those staff not following that practice can look for some immediate discipline?
So I am willing to look into any issues that you want to provide me with specifics. I will not send out an email to all the wardens making some veiled threats about discipline, about something that they are or aren't doing. So if you have specific information regarding a facility and or the individuals at that facility that I can help limit my search, that's the only way this is going to be resolved. It never works to send out information because 8 or 9 of the facilities are probably doing it right, and the one that's not isn't going to know that it's them. So if you want to shoot me an email, that would be great.
Okay, that sounds great, but just to respond to that, there are inmates in particular who have contacted, had their family members contact the DOC and specifically concerning their incidents, and they haven't got a response, which is why we're asking.
Okay, so I mean, I don't know who they contacted. I've actually talked to probably 3 or 4 different people just this week alone. I know that Kathy talks to people almost on a daily basis. So I sometimes think that it's unfair to say that no one has heard from anyone, because I know we're all on the phone pretty frequently. And so, again, I'm happy to help out. I'm happy to do what I can. And I actually am the last signer on grievance appeals. So the grievance starts at the facility, the grievance appeal comes to me. So I see all of those contacts and I sign off on the last grievance.
Thank you. I'll just tell those individuals that they can continue contacting with you as a point person. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay, the next thing would be, are the dental offices still accessible to the offenders?
Yes, it is. I know that there has been some issues. We've had some hiring, dental. That dental services, I just got an update on that. We've had a number of changes. It's hard to find and hire dentists and keep them. But we have, we have 2, one new started and one that is going through his background stuff right now that has a conditional offer. So yeah, we want to fix that. That's got to get addressed, and it's been a real challenge.
We have 2 dental postings out online now. So if anyone knows a dentist, tell them to apply.
Thank you. Can we just revisit with a couple quick questions, CMR? Now, I'm thinking that many of us who had underlying health conditions, we did work within the facility with those same underlying conditions. So what is the grave difference in the community?
So I can only say, this is one of those places of, we're trying to accommodate. We have to be careful what we're looking for here, because if that's the argument, then there's no reason for people to be out. And so I would just say that it's one thing when you're in a cohort group, and it's another thing when you're out in the community and being exposed in a variety of different ways. I'm not saying that there isn't possibilities, but ultimately, This is the challenge, and this is the way this is structured. From the beginning, it was a house arrest situation, and that's where we are. And so that's the answer.
Thank you.
I have a statement I'd like to make. My name is Faye Jefferson, about the release program medically. I would just like to make a comment that when they call people and interview them about people coming to live with you, they don't really clarify that you are the person that's taking care of them completely. So I don't know what happened, what the breakdown is, but I think they need to be a little bit more thorough, because I'm looking at it where I'm doing okay with mine here. I'm looking at it as a setup for failure, because it's pretty hard for a lot of people just to take care of themselves with the pandemic going on right now. So I just think that they wasn't very clear letting people know, and it seems like that's a setup for failure. So that's just a comment I wanted to make.
And I appreciate that. I do. I think, there wasn't a model for this before, ever. We've never done this before, ever. And so it is as imperfect as it is. It is what it is.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are at the end. I want to say we covered a lot of material, and we stayed pretty much on time with starting late. I'm gonna finish up. This is Tiffany Flynn Forsland. I'm finishing up with the legislative agenda of what is the DOC's, because we did talk a little about the legislature, so that's going to be included in this agenda moving forward. We'd like to inspire the state to a vision that we share, shrinking the prison system and investing in community solutions, and to have the capacity to focus there instead of responding to daily abuses and repression in the prisons that feels to be left unaddressed by the institution. And to me, that kind of feels like trauma-informed practice.
But I don't know if you want me to, is that a question or?
Well, it's kind of a question. The one thing that comes to mind is you talked about that one piece being in a legislative decision, not a facility decision or your decision. And so
yeah,
that would be one to start with.
So yeah, that's a legislative issue that has to get addressed. For me, what we are looking to do is change the way we think about the management and the administration of sentences. This is conceptual. It's a framework, and it's a framework only. What ultimately has to be done is we put meat to the bones. For me, if we could accomplish something where when people come into the system, I don't care whether it's probation or into the prison, they come in and they go through a comprehensive assessment, and not just CD and education, but it's the full spectrum: mental health, dental, medical, vocational, spiritual, whatever, the whole spectrum, right? And then ultimately, it is informed by them, right, the person, and we want to give that person voice to talk about how they serve their sentence, and what we would look to do is move and reconnoiter how we offer services. So instead of right now treatments and all that stuff is at the back end, we would actually front end load services and give that person, based on the assessment and their voice in that assessment, some voice in how they want to use that time for self-investment. And we know that there are going to be people that are not in a place to say, I want to do that. And there are many who will say, I want to take advantage of doing whatever I can. And if that's the case, we will develop a plan in concert with them to stage and work through kind of what their self-development plan is, whatever that is, and address their needs, and to reduce risk. And ultimately, the way it would be structured is through some type of an earned compliance credit. Or somebody may be able to be released at, let's say it's 50% or 45% or whatever it was, of their sentence based upon the work that they've done on self-improvement. And then they would go out early to supervised release, and that supervised release would itself be not extended, or not, it would be shortened by the length of time that they got out early. So, but it's not the protection of a determinate system that says, no matter what, you get out at 67%. But it provides incentives for those people who decide they want to invest in themselves and address the needs that they have to minimize their risk of reoffense. So that's just a conceptual framework, really building off of what the model that they have at the Mayo Clinic right now. And it's something that we would like to look at doing, because we think it accomplishes both reducing the number of people on supervision potentially, it reduces the number of people in prison. And frankly, if we did the same thing with probation, it's a little bit of notion of dosage probation, which means that based upon needs, you address dosage, and that's certain types of program involvement, and you're done when you've completed the dosage. You're done, because what you've done is you've done that dosage that is generally speaking determined to address your needs and reduce your risk. So this is one of the models of that we think could be worthwhile for the state to consider to reduce the size of the system and better meet the needs of people.
Okay, so would that be policy drafted to put into the legislature to make those changes? Because it sounds like that would be sentencing changes as well as risk assessment.
It doesn't change the sentence. It changes the authority to build in the earned compliance credit based upon a person's self-investment. So sentencing guidelines would have no change, but it does require legislative change.
Okay, all right. And I need to apologize because I used the term inmate, which I try not to do, and it was only in the sake of being explanatory, because I think we need to take this humanity approach just as important as everybody else. Does anybody have anything else in closing?
Did we cover the legislation that I don't remember who's putting it forward, but does the DOC support the ending the contracts with the jails?
Yeah, I mean,
at least the county that
I mean, not
bragged about it. I'm sorry, I said at least the county that put it in their business.
I know what you said. I mean, we're not here to fill their jails, and
okay, that's what we wanted to hear. Thank you.
Line. Yeah.
Thank you, Paul. That's the only question I had on that.
Yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to chime in. I really like that proposal, Commissioner. And if there is a model from Mayo, if you want to send it to us so we can circulate it internally and do some study on it, that would be great.
It's the way they manage patients right now, David, is that they take a multidisciplinary approach, a whole person approach, and the patient is at the center, and the patient has voice in it. So that's really what the model is, and what we're going to do is do some drafting of a framework, and when we get that together, because we have to then put meat on the bones in terms of what the legislative policy would look like, what the law would look like, and that's going to take time, work, and effort, and a lot of input.
Okay, that sounds good. And then just the other thing I would raise, and if other people want to speak to this, I just know that there's been a lot of concern about the felony murder law that started to come up in some of our allies. So I was just wondering if that's something you could speak to.
Yeah, I mean, I've said to people on the felony murder stuff that we're supportive of taking a look at it. I've I mean, I've met many of the people, some of the women and some of the men who are serving life sentences, in some cases life without. They weren't the ones who pulled the trigger, and the trigger puller is going to get out first. And you know, again, it's not about anything other than the fact that it just seems kind of crazy. So we agree, and we agree that the state should look at that. So we're supportive of that happening. In fact, one of the early sessions, the group who's been working on felony murder law, we said that we would help convene a group to just have some conversations, the discussions about this from a policy standpoint, and I'm willing to do that. It's of course, again, I don't want to make, I know this seems like it's the excuse for everything, but the COVID stuff has created a little bit of a barrier, but we'll get there.
Oh, does that suffice, David?
That's a good answer to my question. Are there other people who have questions?
Yeah, this is Sierra. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
My question is when will they review the felony murder law?
It would have to be, and then it would have to be in the next legislative session. It won't come up. It will not get addressed in any of these special sessions. So I think the key thing that needs to happen is from both an advocacy perspective as well as just deep levels of stakeholder engagement, and that includes people talking with their own county attorneys, because that's going to be one of the places that there's going to have to be some work done and discussions, there are certainly county attorneys who think that there's work that can be done. There are certain county attorneys that feel like it has to be maintained. So I think we just all have a lot of work to do, and I think ultimately understanding the current law, I think, is first and foremost for all of us, and then second of all, what does a good and responsive policy look like, of statute look like, and so that I think those are the things that need to happen, and so as a starting point.
I have one thing that I thought of that has to do with what you talked about, putting treatment in that self-assessment part that you were talking about, that would lower sentences. In New Jersey, they have a prison that is all mental health and addiction. They get those services, and it has a 19% recidivism rate. Is that something we could work towards?
Yeah, and I think ultimately the model that we're talking about is if those are the needs that need to get addressed, and that assessment and that person who's coming into the system gives voice to the fact that through learning about themselves through assessment, right? Which is really their voice. That's all assessment is. And then they get that feedback, they get to talk about it. And if it's mental health needs, or if it's substance use disorder, or if it's trauma, or whatever that is, we chart a course with them to get them through and address those needs, no matter what it is. And I think that's really what the model has to look like, so that we set them up for success. And really a key component of this, and I should have said this earlier, is that from day one, if you're coming into the prison from day one, there has to be, while we want to address those needs, we also want to make sure that we're lifting up and building up and readying supports for that person in the community, which is some of the conversations we all have had. So that's the comprehensive approach that we have to take, and that's what builds a smaller system and more effective, I think, in the long haul.
Yep, and I just want to note that with the prisons being more with people of color, Blacks and Natives and Mexicans, and with the trauma study with ACEs, it was done with 17,000 basically Caucasian people. Not that you can, not that there's just Caucasian, but the fact that the prisons are aware of the cultural trauma that comes with having that color of skin.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. You know, some people have said, hey, why are risk factors higher oftentimes for people of color when you do assessment, right? Yeah. And what's missing in that, well, certainly bias can be one of the factors, but what's also missing in the facts is the reality that, you know, communities of color are often over-policed and under-resourced. It's a variety of those factors. And so ultimately, what this model does is it really, we begin to focus some of our efforts, and it does try to address the inequities of that, because we're instead of just saying, look, there's more risk, without understanding the fact that, you know, the structure of the system put it there. How do we need to address that? And ultimately that means higher levels of supports and a greater emphasis on problem solving, and that should reduce some of the revocation stuff. And so it's a, you know, it's a big picture model that we think we could actually get through the legislature, especially if we get, you know, some change in the Senate, because we've struggled there to get things through. And I think we stand a chance of being able to really look at an incredibly a model that really creates opportunity.
Yep, and that's excellent. And I also can add Washington State is an ACES state and using those measures in their prisons for success.
Got it. Yeah, and I think we've talked to I talked to the commissioner from Washington State as well about some of the things they're doing.
Excellent. Well, with that, unless anybody has anything else, I think we have emails.
Quick statement. I just want to say that, you know, in regards to CMR, I understand the conditions and that this didn't have a model to go on, but I would like the powers that be to keep in mind that it is appearing as if those of us who have a health condition are being punished for those conditions, and though by saying, well, if you can't work, you still get the choice to get out and save your life, but fend for yourself. And with that note, I'm done.
Thank you.
Okay, are we closing?
Good night. Yeah, I think we're done.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah. No problem. Good night.
And if people want to stay for just a second and debrief, you can. Now that they're gone.
Are they gone?
Yes.
Well, I'm a little confused. I think I asked him if he would support ending the county contracts, and he said no, not a full ban. But then when it was asked again, I think he said, yeah, we're not their piggy bank. But I could be wrong.
That's what I heard loud and clear.
He did say earlier that they could save money by not having to pay to use them. So it sounds.
I'm gonna get off because they got me pissed off.
I'm a little pissed off, so I'm gonna hang up, you guys. Okay.
All right, take a deep breath. Take care.
Yes. Scream, and being pissed off is fine.
Yep, and then take a deep breath and relax.
Trust me, I'm gonna put it all to pen and paper.
I know.
He knows it's coming. He knows
Love you,
it's
Angela.
very important to you.
Bye, you guys.
I heard him say he wanted to use them less.
Yeah.
And
He doesn't want that money going.
part of that was just the economics of it, which makes sense. But he doesn't want to do away with it. It sounded, and Will maybe know more about this too. They want to. It sounded like he wanted to structure more to use it for short term.
They passed the bill this year. It was Wolgamott from St. Cloud to do that short term thing. And that's not even what we're talking about at all. And I hate the fact that they bring that up to confuse matters. Of course, we wouldn't want to ban a process like that. We want more of that, right? People spending a short time in jail instead of a long time in prison. So that is completely irrelevant to what we're talking about. We asked them to send a simple memo to Candy-Ojai County saying, we're not going to be your piggy bank, and they refused. He kind of gave the impression here that he would do that, but before they said they would not do that because they need a good relationship with the jails.
I think he'll say that to us, but he won't say it to.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid. They want good relationships with the county. So we got to keep putting the political pressure on and stop having people be so deferential to the DOC. The Democrats are far too deferential to the DOC. But the other thing I was thinking about too, and we should think about this, what he's proposing, I just don't see it working very well. I think it's going to lead to judges saying, they treat prisoners like Mayo patients. Now I feel even better about sending them to prison. Mayo Clinic is the best. I don't think that's a good way to lower the prison population. I understand where he's coming from. I understand the theory behind it, but there's just a lot of people that don't belong in prison in the first place. And if we tell judges that we're going to use this Mayo model, I would feel better about sending someone to prison rather than thinking hard
Well,
about it.
and the other piece, the reason why it won't work is their bias and their attitudes towards these people in the first place. Are they really going to take them seriously? Because I have the paperwork from my person in Faribault, and that's what's going to them next. And none of the stuff he said was applied. And they have basically deemed him going in with a severe alcohol issue, but after treatment and everything else and the risk assessment, they have him coming out with a serious alcohol issue. They act like he's done nothing there. And he couldn't get early work release, saying he was a threat to society. So I have all that coming in a letter, and it all goes against everything he said.
Yeah, prisons are terrible places. They are. They're terrible places. They're not places to get drug and alcohol treatment. They're not places to get mental health treatment. If anything, mental health gets worse in most prisons.
Right.
I mean, we're going to see what the proposal looks like, but legislatively, this is definitely not something that I would support in this form, but we'll see what comes of it.
Yeah.
Matt and Wayne have hands.
Let Wayne go first.
I didn't have it.
My bad. Go, Matt.
Okay, so we were talking at the last big meeting about like looking at prosecutors and judges. So I was thinking about what do we think about maybe opening up to like prosecutor and judge unions, maybe beginning a dialogue with them and saying like, hey, we're sick of you guys sending us to jail. I don't know. What do you think, everybody?
Well, I personally have prosecutor and judge friends that would weigh in, because it was actually a prosecutor that works with Troy that started the circle that I'm in, because she was so sick of seeing the victims all the way around and the recidivism, and she wanted to find new ways to help and stop the whole system. So that's one prosecutor, and same with the judge that is Nikki Starr. She's in mental health addiction court, and just talked to her today. She is trying to find convenient places for her people to get to Zoom meetings, because she knows it's extremely hard. They don't have money, they don't have internet. And I'm actually going to be working with her with the Latina community, the Indian community, and the African community, so that they can have internet and a computer so that they don't miss their court hearings. I mean, so I don't know if that's helpful, because they're actually judges and prosecutors that want to help.
Nice, Tiffany. Is there other people who have reflections on how the meeting went or what we learned or anything like that?
My education, did I hear something tonight that they have the right to put people on work release after half of their sentence? Is that correct? But they don't, but they have the right to do it, but they don't do that. Is that correct?
They
Yes.
have the right to do it, but they don't have the capacity to do it. Right.
But wouldn't that be a capacity of the halfway houses? And
I didn't understand that either, but I didn't want to be stuck on it. I really want.
I think he was making it sound like that's what he wanted to move to, but they were not doing it right now. And he has said that like they come in and do all this other thing before they do their treatment part, and he wants them to do it right away. But it sounded like it's something he wants to do, but they're not doing it right now.
okay, so right now they only release people at the last 8 to 12 months.
Yeah, 8 months, and we had received memos that there was expanded to 12, but we should double check that because.
Okay.
Yeah, there's memos. I'm going to and I'll put it in the email, and I'm going to also email a copy of it since he's not.
There's also something about them going to minimum. There's supposed to be more benefits if they get to minimum versus being released and stuff too. And work release. I mean, that's what's in the writing.
My son is already in minimum, and they changed it. We changed the rule to 12 months. They still push them back anyway. So,
Are halfway houses taking people now, or are they still pretty inactive because of COVID?
Yeah, I don't know.
I know if Terry, I don't know if you guys know that, but yeah, they still. Well, I know this place is still taken.
Yeah. Anyone who hasn't spoken want to chime in? Antonio, Sarah, Sammy, others. Anyone got to say something? Something they want to say?
Yeah, I do. It's frustrating that they take insulin from everybody, but you have to.
Tiffany, can you mute?
But they're asking them to all come to them directly. It's like, I just doesn't make sense to me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Because I know my loved one has been saying something for months. You know, and the little that they do has made some difference, but not enough.
Prisons are terrible places. They're not Mayo Clinic. They're terrible places. You know, we're not at a political place where people are not going to be incapacitated, but we got to be very careful about prison reform, making people feel better about prison. And this is a clear example that you're pointing out, and we can't even treat people with diabetes correctly. Why would we think that we're going to rehabilitate people
Right.
in prison? Terrible places.
Antonio?
Yeah, on the diabetes thing, I got a close brother that's in there, type 1 diabetes, and he always raises the concern of the meals.
Yeah.
He's very conscious too. This brother takes very good care of himself. Like he gets his levels down so low to where like it's he might as well not even be a diabetic, but he is. It's very serious. But he just takes extremely well care of himself. But he pointed out that all of the meals are carb based.
Yeah.
Which anyone who knows anything about that is, you know, carbs converting to sugar. And so like they're just sugaring guys up in there, guys and girls up in there. So I really feel like we need to address that. The meals being served every day, all day, are a diabetic nightmare. So even with, you know, the insulin thing, we got to give better options that you know, address their concerns, their health concerns, as far as the meals go. So
Totally agree.
If I know one of the things they would say is that they do offer diabetic meals, but from what I hear, the diabetic meals are no good.
Exactly. Everything. So they offer alternatives, what's called alternatives. And what they do is they give you more calories of a carb. You know, so there's actually no diabetic specific meal. There's, if you don't eat meat, they give you a what do they call it, a lacto-ovo meal or something like that. So it takes out the meal, but then they give you bread. They give you, potatoes, rice, things of that nature. All things that elevate blood sugar. So.
Yeah. Christina, Sierra, Kim, any of you have something you want to say or reflect before we get off here?
I know one other thing I heard, somebody's talking about community programs. But I was going to point out, I put it in the chat, but there are some community programs that are better than current treatment required programs, such as like SO treatment, drug and alcohol treatment, that type of stuff. And we have a few of them out here in the Twin Cities.
Okay, so all I'm gonna say is I guess I'm really wondering how much of a correlation there is between behavior and who actually succeeds when they're released. Because sometimes I don't think you can really tell when you release people. So people that are always going out because they're going out because of their good behavior, they may have just as high of a success rate as people going out that didn't have the best behavior. How do you get those people released? The ones that are maybe getting in more arguments or maybe a little bit more outspoken or maybe don't comply, because they might do just as well when they're let out.
That's a good point. Just like a lot of them that were early released in those shootings, they behaved well enough to get out and didn't behave well once they got out.
The other thing is to point out with alcoholisms, from what I can't really quote my source, but from what I've read, when you're court ordered to go in for alcoholism or drug abuse of whatever, when you're court ordered to go into treatment, just as many people that are court ordered into treatment are successful as people that go in voluntarily. And the ones that were court ordered didn't necessarily want to go in. They were made to go in through the courts, or they went in to get out of stricter sentencing. So I think that listening to everybody, talk about how people are getting out on good behavior, et cetera, how do you promote these other people that are kind of left behind because they don't fit in that box? And I don't know a whole lot about anything. Those are just my thoughts.
Cool, thanks, Christina. Sierra or Kim, do you want to say something?
I just want to say thank you guys for having this, and I appreciate everything everyone is doing. Keep up the good work. We may think that sometimes things aren't being done, but the more and more we push for it, the more and more things will happen.
Nice, thanks, Sierra. Kim?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks too for trying on that CIP issue. I kind of expected his reaction, and I'm still extremely angry and frustrated with it. But thank you though for at least, for trying to see, pushing it still.
Yeah. Cool. Philip, are you awake? Do you want to have a last word? Do you want to invite people to the upcoming events?
Oh yeah. We're gonna go visit Paul Snell Monday, starting at 10 o'clock. As many as can, invite your friends. We're gonna go pay him a visit 10 o'clock Monday morning once again.
Where's that at?
1450 Energy Park Drive.
Isn't there another event too?
We're having an activist picnic. So we can just kind of relax, get to know each other on an informal basis. food, fun, games. That'll be on the 23rd of August, Sunday after next, starting at 3 p.m. You can bring your own food, but IWOC is hosting this event.
Are we gonna get an email or something?
You can, if you're on our email list, you should have already gotten one.
Oh, okay, I'll check.
Just two quick things. I'm a really cautious person, so I'm just trying to think this out strategic a little bit. Sarah, are you still on?
I'm here.
Okay. The meeting, I think it's good to meet with the victim rights group. I think that's really important. We got to be super careful, though. They have incredible sway in the Walls administration. Almost everyone I meet in the Walls administration identifies with the victims' rights movement, and they have traditionally been quite clear that there's victims and there's perpetrators, and they are two very different groups, and they have a lot of power in Minnesota. So just think strategically. We definitely do not want to anger any of those groups because
Sure.
wow, they've got power. And
No, I think that you're absolutely right. And I did, kind of vaguely mention on the call that I have a research paper that was actually completed by a student from Hamlin Law School, in which she eloquently outlines like the different thought process as it relates to victims. And to your point, like the victim perpetrator perspective is, to be quite frank, very antiquated and almost, makes it out to where men are always perpetrators and poor, innocent, unable to stand up for themselves, coy women, are always the victim, which is not necessarily the case. I think that where I, in this instance, would have more of a voice would to say that, yes, absolutely agree. There are instances where someone has been truly victimized. And I'm not saying that we don't, that we can't protect them. However, there are other instances, such as my own, where I was presumptively labeled a victim that is unwarranted, unmerited. And I've even had the police since then go, oh yeah, we made a mistake. You should have been listed as a mentioned. And I'm just like, is this really, my next question would be, is this really the document that we want to use to validate who's a victim and who's not? Like, then we're putting rights all in the police's hand to say, well, she made one statement that, in my instance, they said, was there pushing involved? And I said, well, yeah, there was pushing involved. Well, they didn't ask any further questions, who pushed who? What was the circumstances surrounding it? Nothing like that. I just answered the question honestly. Yes, there was pushing involved. So they made the assumption that my husband pushed me in a violent and terrifying manner, and that I must be a victim of some kind of domestic violence, which was not the case in any form or fashion. So they just have to be, cognizant that that designation is made off of minimal information and 100% police presumption. And the victims should have a voice in this. You see where I'm going?
I agree. I agree with you, Sarah. I'm just saying, be careful, because they're a very powerful group. And so we'll just think hard about how we present. I completely agree with you. I do, but that's not the way they see the world generally.
I think that's fair. That's fair.
And the second thing, in terms of strategizing, and I think Bruce and Lisa can agree, every Democrat we've met with so far, the first thing they say is, what does Paul Schnell think? Don't you guys think that's true?
Yeah.
Yeah. They have incredible respect for him. I think targeting him has not helped us politically. I'm just going to come out and say that it's not helped us politically. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying it hasn't worked. And it's a real hurdle to get over. But that's just the reality, is that every single person we've talked to has incredible deference to what he thinks. And Lisa and Bruce, you can disagree with me on that, but that's been my impression.
No, I mean, I think he says the right things and wants to do a lot of things. Obviously, he's running a big bureaucracy that and with legislative constraints. So what he can do is going to be very slow. It's going to be a lot slower than we'd like, you know, like releasing these people in the county jails or whatever. But yeah, I mean, I compare him to what we would have if we had a Republican governor. I'm guessing you guys wouldn't even get a meeting.
No, and I'm guessing he won't be confirmed by the Senate. Did you see today they didn't confirm one of Walls's? And I would guess he's next, especially after he closed these prisons. They would love to not confirm him if they can.
What are the Democrats or the DFL's chances of taking the Senate? Is it realistic or?
Yeah, I'd say it's only two. It's only 2 seats they got to flip, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah, it's very close, but that doesn't mean that they'll do anything, of course.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you all so much. There's obviously way more conversations to be had. Talk to each other. Also, there's a big meeting in 2 Sundays, probably, or maybe we'll just picnic it. Yeah, appreciate everyone, and thanks everyone who spoke and the work put in. Anybody else want a last word here?
No, thank you and good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
All right.
Night.
Put these on. We're here.
All right, Will.
All right, Phil.
I'll shoot you over.
Even Safia Khan has talked about how mandatory arrest has kind of backfired in some ways. And so I think there's ways we can do it. We just got to do it really carefully.
Yep. So I'll shoot you an email and we can maybe connect outside of this call, as well as I'll share with you the research paper that was done by that law student.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right, y'all.